So we'll give it a minute, and then before we kick off, we haven't tended to have a lot of people online. A lot of people just watch the video afterwards.
Yeah. I've seen them on
fun.
YouTube and in the Together Spatial website. So.
All right. We've had Lizanne jump on, but we might kick it off.
Sure.
And so I'll just admit people as they jump on. So welcome, Vaughn, to today's Points, Lines and Polygons. So basically, for those people watching and listening in live, it's just a general chat with Vaughn today. But if you have any questions, please just either type them into the chat or we'll have some time at the end for questions as well. So let's just kick it off. Welcome, Vaughn. And so we just really wanted to delve into your career, and
Sure.
and so you can take us back as far as you really want to, whether that be university days or first sort of roles that you had. So I'll just leave it really for you to start where you want, and then we'll take it from there.
Sure. Okay. I've been doing GIS for over 20 years, and I'd say my first experience with GIS, though, it was when I was still in high school. So I was lucky in a way that when I was sort of a teenager, my father worked a lot in Southeast Asia, and we used to go up, visit those sort of things in holidays. And one of the jobs he was working on at the time, whilst he was in finance, it was with the Water Authority, and there was two Americans there that were responsible for mapping out all the underground water pipes were in Bangkok, of all places. So you can imagine, when they didn't really understand where things were 25 years ago, but with illegal connections, they had a pretty interesting job. So I remember my dad introducing me to these two guys because I was good at geography and computers at school. I think he was kind of trying to show me where there were career paths, and it was quite interesting. So anyway, came back to Sydney, went through high school, and got to that point where it's like university time coming around. What do you do? Do you do a trade? Do you go to university? What do you really want to do? I actually wanted to build boats, but that was a 7-year trip through uni, and I thought there's no way I'm going to last 7 years. And again, it was like there's this thing called GIS. So I went off to the Macquarie Uni open day, did my research, and thought I would enroll. So I did the Bachelor of Science program at Macquarie University, finished in around 2001, I think, and my major was GIS. I think they were calling it Geographic Information Science back then. So I believe the program is still there. But I was quite lucky. I had jobs at uni like everyone else does, working at Woolies and that sort of thing. But I applied for a job with Map Data Services, or I think it was Map Data Sciences back then. But it was being run by Laurie Edwards at the time. He was running as a startup, and got a job there as like a junior GIS person. So I spent my sort of 2-3 years there doing a lot of work on road networks, all the map info, point of interest data sets. There was people there building geocoders, online maps. To be honest, at the time, I didn't appreciate what he was doing, but he had Google Maps before Google Maps existed. Like it was really quite clever. Yeah, it's really quite clever. And that job was good. It gave me a really great foundation in data editing and data quality, which has been a theme throughout my career. You come across different data sets and the products that we're building now. So after about 3 or so years, I left and went to Manly Council, which is now part of Northern Beaches Council in Sydney. Again, as a land and property officer, doing the cadastre parcels, fixing up the land register, sorting out 149 certificates. That typical council workflow. The lady that I reported to, she moved on. I took over the role of sort of like the GIS coordinator, which the land and property person used to report into. So it was a bit more a wider role then. We were at the time setting up sort of the council GIS system, which this is pretty old school, but it goes back to mapping for Expenair days. So the decent online mapping connecting into the property systems. We did a lot of work really in cleaning up data and cleaning up the database. So that property database, making sure everything was correct, making sure the 149 certificates were synced, working with the legal teams. I learned a lot there. Was there for a good 3-4 years. Learned lots around property planning, development, what the different teams in councils do. I think a lot of councils get a bit of a bad rap that they're doing a lot of work that people never see. They're also severely under-resourced a lot of the time. So yeah, I did a good stint there. Manly's a fantastic place to work. There's some really great people working there at the time. So learned quite a lot. So from Manly, it was around 2008, I think, I decided to leave council and do something else, and I ended up at Wood Mackenzie. And I've been at Wood Mackenzie ever since in a variety of GIS roles. So I started there working with the Cole Group. So Wood Mackenzie is a business. We focus on data analytics, research and consultancy within the natural resources and energy industry. So broadly, the company looks at commodities, metals and mining. There's an upstream oil and gas section, and there's power and renewables. And within each of those sections, there's a vast majority, a big variety, of things that people do across all the major commodities. So within mining, gold, nickel, iron ore, coal, you name it, rare earths, oil and gas, LNG, subsurface, markets, assets, you name it. So a lot of like the real like focused in work is sort of ground up asset analysis. So they look at every asset, they cost them, they figure out production profiles, how much does it cost a particular mine to get their product to market, and they add all that together. Then they put in company profiles, market profiles, and there's data across all of those. The interesting thing with Wood Mac is there's a lot of businesses that do this kind of work. They might focus on a particular area. They might be 100% within power renewables. They may focus 100% in mining, may focus 100% in upstream. It's quite interconnected now, and so that's a big part of what we're doing now at Wood Mac, is building tools and models around how the changes in the metals industry affect power, how those changes in the gas industry affect other industries. And it is, I won't say it's like the butterfly effect, but it is in a way. Small changes here can have ramifications elsewhere, and that's the really interesting part about the work there. So I started off as a GIS in the coal team, so it was really around supporting research groups around the coal industry, Australia, Indonesia. Learned a lot. That role broadened out to broader metals and mining globally, so exposed to mining projects in Africa, United States, South America, doing work with research and consulting teams. So that kind of work is anything from, someone wants to build a railway line. If they build a railway line, will it have customers at market? Who's in the particular area? What ports are involved? Market studies, through to product development. So we have subscription service products that people supply to data products. Most of those have some form of a map involved that allows some form of spatial analysis. Some of them can be quite big, particularly in oil and gas industry. There's a lot of information there for people to use. So that did that role for a few years. Ended up becoming like the team manager for Asia Pacific, and that gave me a broader focus. So it was effectively you worked within the region, mining, oil and gas, power, and supported the teams as they needed to be supported. Did that role for quite a number of years. And people ask me why sometimes. There was just changes in my life. Kids were born. Moved houses. The work was always varied, and it's been quite interesting. So did that for a number of years. Ended up taking on the global role for Wood Mac, mainly because I had a couple of people, probably 2 or 3 people over the years within my business now, Wood Mackenzie, that have been more like mentors, like managers and mentors, and put a bit of faith in you, help you learn new things, build up skills and experience on projects. And the biggest thing I've learned over the years, it doesn't matter the level of your role or what you're doing within GIS, because there's a huge variety. can work in councils, you can work in state, federal governments, you can work in industry like I do. You can work in environmental sections. It's about showing value. You really have to prove the value of what you're doing and the value of the systems that you're building and maintaining. And really, why should the executive or senior management give you money to do what you want to do in GIS? You really have to show the value and prove that out. So they help me with those kind of learnings, I would say, over the years, and other experiences as well. Working in private industry now for a long time, that you do get changes. It's similar to government. Governments change, departments change. We have the same thing. Private industry changes. We've gone through a number of private equity owners. We were owned by a US company for a long time that was in insurance data called Verisk. We used to actually maintain the GIS systems on behalf of all of those companies. So whilst it was their cloud infrastructure, we maintained the ArcGIS Enterprise, and different people, different business units would use it. So that was a really good learning in terms of how people are using particular systems and their workflows. So that was what I like to do now, is I take everything back to workflows and value. And if you can do those two things, you can build up the strategy around that to what you should be doing. So at Wood Mac, we're a bit of a hybrid organisation. We are Esri ArcGIS Enterprise, but we do have GeoServer and some open source technology on top of that. There's different reasons. The main one for me is, there are people that sit in open source camp. There are people that sit in Esri camp. I'm a lot more flexible. Like, if you can show the value and prove the point of the systems that you're using, I don't really mind. Like, some people don't have the budgets, for example, to use a full stack Esri system, so they're forced down a different route. But for me, it comes back to the workflows, and for the workflows that we have at Wood Mackenzie, Esri is a very good underlying foundation for data storage, management, and dissemination, particularly with a team that I have that's spread globally. So my team makeup is people in Australia, Europe, US, Southern Africa, all working on ArcGIS Enterprise in US AWS estates. So to be able to do that in one environment is saved a lot of hassle compared to how we used to do things on file servers 15, 20 years ago. So at Wood Mac now, we've moved across sort of into a product group. We did that some time ago, and that's been really good in terms of gaining greater experience with engineers, product people, client services, sales, around learning what it is we're doing, and then how does geospatial fit in that bigger picture. So how do we add value into people's workflows? We do a lot of work with teams now around data pipelines, data sourcing. We do a lot of that in Python. We did have FME for a little while, but just within our organization, we could do a bit more with Python. We weren't using FME as much, so we were able to sort of move that out. But I fully understand why people do use FME. It's just we have quite a robust data engineering group at Wood Mackenzie. We were able to learn a lot off, and so we source external data sets. We do a lot of work around data quality, data maintenance, editing, functions into products, geospatial calculations, you name it, and a lot of advisory work. So a big company like we have at Wood Mac, we are not doing all the GIS work. There are data groups, data analysts that delve in and do a little bit of GIS here and there. We're more advisory. We help them. We maintain the system, the infrastructure, build the tools and models for them, help them maintain their data so they can push it through to their products. So in that regard, it's quite interesting, and it's highly varied amount of work that we do.
Yeah, it does really sound like a very interesting and varied workplace in that, you've started from, local to then region, then to global. And I think that's a really important part of any person's job, not necessarily getting to a global level, but having that varied work opportunities and opportunities to grow and learn, a bit like you said, with those mentors you've had, but also then underlying it, looking at the different technologies and using them in a way that can provide value, as you said, because I mean, you've obviously seen lots of technology change over the time, you know, from council using map info through to, you know, using some open source stuff. And I certainly agree that, you know, there's certainly people who are in one camp or the other. And from my own GIS sort of consulting work, I'll basically work with whatever the client has or needs, and I think it's useful having that different perspective on tools and software and things that are in the market, because then you can advise better as well, rather than just being someone who says, "Yep, we're only going to do it this way." Whereas, you know, there might be a tool within QGIS or GeoServer or wherever that actually fills the gap that you're actually doing. And so it sounds like that that yourself and Wood Mackenzie's are certainly embracing that diverse technology.
Yeah, as we say, we are, it is quite hybrid. So, you know, internally, there's a lot of work done in Esri, but externally, we use products like Mapbox, GeoServer. You know, we're running transformations with GDAL, that kind of thing. So, open source Python libraries, you know, you can do a lot with GeoPandas if you sit down and have a look at it. AI is changing things rapidly as well. You know, there's the things you can do now using AI is actually getting quite scary. I think if you're not using it in your work, start having a look at it. It's quite eye-opening. It's better, in my opinion. It's a bit like giving someone a loaded gun. You can hurt someone or hurt yourself if you don't know what you're doing. But that's what I'm saying. AI in the hands of a geospatial expert, you're going to get better geospatial outcomes than you will to someone trying to do something with AI and vibe coding a solution. So that's why I would really encourage people, have a look at the tools, use them, see how you can, you know, make yourself.
And I do agree there. Yeah, and I think the efficiency is a big thing about it. But I think what it does show for certainly the spatial industry is that it's another tool set that you can use. And you still need to understand what's coming out the other end, because it's pointless just looking at some tasks to do and then accepting the result. You want to be able to use it and then see the results and then go, all right, I need to tweak it, or it's not giving me the result I need. Well, where are we going wrong? And I think that's the key. When you've got that experience behind it, being able to go, well, what's coming in, what's going out, is it a valid result? Is it a valid answer? Especially it sounds like, you know, because you've got those workflows all going all the way through, you know, assisting different parts of different industries and how that affects others. You want to make sure that, you know, you're not just pumping out data for the sake of it and it not really making a lot of sense, or there's errors in it or whatever.
It also changes the way you work. Like, for example, your data, it's the old, you know, garbage in, garbage out. And with GIS data, there's a lot of free GIS data out there in the world. Don't get me wrong. Some of it's good, some of it's not so good. I think if you work in Australia and you're lucky, there's some very good publicly available GIS data sets. But once you come outside of Australia, you know, in places like South America and Africa, it can be very difficult to get good quality GIS data. If you're looking at minerals industries, you know, just the ability to even source tenements like we would here in New South Wales, Queensland, just go and download, that is not doable in many places. So you're maintaining data sets that might be, for example, geo-referenced, still geo-referencing maps, that kind of work. But the quality of the data that you put in and the infrastructure around that, you know, your metadata, does make a big difference to the results that you get out at the other end. And it forces you to put some better governance around what you're actually doing, which can always be better, I think, for everybody. So.
Yeah, that's a really good point in that when you see the value of the governance around the data, then people will pay more attention to collecting that metadata and make sure that they, record it and store it, because it's not necessarily how you're using it right now for this project. It's how that someone else might use it for another project, or even when you're collecting the data for your existing project, what if you do a couple of extra things which will make it easier in the future for other things? It's easier to capture it capture those extra bits of data at the start than it is to add those couple of extra attributes a couple of years later or whatever it happens to be. So
yeah,
I think we've all done that.
We've all done it in a big organization. I work in a big organization. We do have legacy systems and things like that as well. So, but in a way, whilst we're always trying to build towards the future, you also have to support the things that are happening, what keeps the lights on day to day. And that's where that's where the focus is at the moment, is really about determining these are the projects and the real value that we add in terms of the new work that we're doing, but you're also having to maintain the old systems. And sometimes the older systems, they're built different ways. They have their own quirks, you know what I mean? But it is interesting how starting to be able, for example, migrating data to data lakes, that sort of thing, being able to use AI across them, it's incredibly powerful. I don't think everyone is still trying to figure out exactly what this means. We won't know for a few more years, but the GIS role for someone starting, I would say 2027, 2028 is going to be very, very different to what I did 20 odd years ago. The tools and technology available to you now are absolutely phenomenal. Who knows where we'll be 10, 15 years, might be digital twin of the world. I'm not sure, but that's the path I think we're all on.
Yeah, and it is, and I think it is evolving very quickly. From both the GIS side of my business and the recruitment side of my business, that I'm able to a lot of those tasks using AI or applications or whatever. I'm not a big fan of the term AI, only because, and my rationale is it's very clever programming, and before AI was a nice buzzword. Certainly in Earth observation and remote sensing and all that sort of side of things, there was lots of machine learning which would actually go and, what is this image of? Can it go and, you can teach it to then pick out certain species of trees and all that sort of stuff. And that sort of teaching it is what AI is essentially doing behind the scenes as well. It's learning, and so it's very clever, and I certainly use it very regularly these days for different parts of different things. Especially if I'm working on a project for electrical organisation in New South Wales, and they've got a legacy system, and no one has maintained the documentation because the system was put in 20 years ago. And for me to try and delve into that data and why it's structured in a certain way, AI has been really good for that. Going, here's the user manual. Tell me why this data structure is like this. And then I'll go, that makes a bit of sense, but it makes it harder to then, put it all together. But yeah, so I think, as you said, very interesting times ahead. So.
I think too, it also helps because, when I started, GIS was, you can be a 100% GIS person, and those roles still exist, but it's becoming more of a skill set. And I think over time, AI is going to continue that path where people who aren't GIS degrees, GIS at TAFE, or long-term GIS people are starting to have those workflows. I definitely see that within our company, that you have within data pipelines. People will come to us and say, look, we just need to calculate an elevation or something. Can you show us how to do that for whatever they're doing? So GIS as a skill set is growing. It's becoming more agnostic. If you look at the way things happening with Esri software, they're definitely making it in such a way that it's easier for people to do things, more web-based work, more web-based editing. That's common across the industry. What you can build yourself with AI now is pretty impressive. Rapid application development. If you've got some engineers that can help you do the actual deployment side of things and make sure you're doing it correctly, I would say if you're only doing 2 or 3 workflows, you could do that open source artificial intelligence quite easily.
Yeah, and I think the way that people can use it these days is expanding into either the non-traditional industries of GIS. You probably you look back and GIS traditionally and remote sensing and all those sorts of things were all land-based and property boundaries and capturing of rivers and roads and all those sorts of base information. And now the types of organisations that are starting to use GIS and spatial technologies is growing, and the business units within those is growing as well. I did a project or did a recruitment job for an advertising organisation, and they basically they put the billboards on bus stops and railway stations and all those sorts of things. And that was a perfect, they'd never used GIS. They had lots and lots of data. And in their data had location information, like it was, the corner of Smith Street and Fifth Street or whatever it happened to be. But they had lots of data which had a location to it. It had never taken the path of visualizing it. And they got Esri to actually develop them an application, and then went, oh, we need someone to actually now do that in-house to be able to, and so they hired someone to do that. So I think it's really interesting, and even the way that it sounds like that you're using it, is expanding between, the tradition and the non-traditional parts, just linking them all together using spatial technologies as that, or one of the connectors. So
yeah, that's a key thing, and I mean we've spoken a lot around AI, but underneath the hood, you do need the right data. That's how it works, and that's the point. My career, the job I do now, it's geospatial, and it's heavily focused on geospatial data across many industries. What's great about geospatial GIS is the ability to link otherwise disparate data sets together, and you do that on a map. It's the most simplest way. So if I could give an example, you could think of the North Sea between UK and Norway. Traditionally, a very mature oil and gas industry. They're now building a lot of wind farms. They're looking at carbon capture, but in separate data sets, all you'll get is a row. By putting them together in GIS, you can actually start to do the real analysis that says, is there a depleted oil field that can be used for carbon capture? If we want to build a wind farm here, how close is it to oil and gas infrastructure? Where can we run our cables? All that kind of thing. And it can only be done in GIS. And that's the really interesting part of the job. It's a bit like SimCity on steroids in a way, but I feel like this sort of video games.
Yes, yeah, that's a very good analogy. Yeah, so where do you see from here your role going within Wood Mackenzie? Is it sort of are you finding that it's growing and you're able to service a lot more business units and getting that getting the business on board, as you were sort of saying earlier?
Yeah, I mean, we're quite lucky in that the business does value geospatial data and GIS. We went through that probably a decade ago. They understand. They know that most of the data that we cover has some form of GIS component. Because at its heart, we're talking around costing assets. Where is an asset? What's it related to? Markets, infrastructure, other assets, you name it, weather patterns. For example, a cyclone comes in, knocks out part of the Queensland industry. What does that impact? Is it railway lines? Is it mines? Is it oil and gas? You name it. Wind turbines go down. All that kind of stuff is being done. For us, it's just about continued growth and keeping up with the change. Like, it's really rapidly growing organisation in terms of the things that we're doing. Particularly looking in the US, they're doing a lot of work there now with data centers. We're starting to talk about that in Australia. That will probably be the next big thing for people doing sort of site studies, site selection, that kind of work. So yeah, for us, it's keeping up with the changes in technology, making sure that the geospatial part is always considered and front and center in our products. Most of them do have some form of GIS component. And I just take it back to that what we were talking about earlier and delivering value. It's making sure that we're continuing to deliver value. It's very easy to sit back and go, job done, but everything changes so quickly that you're constantly making sure that what you're doing is the best thing for the business and for the people that we support.
Yeah, I think that's really quite valuable advice, delivering value. And that goes for, so not just GIS, but, any sort of business, if you're trying to build a business, you might have the best product, but unless you can find the value that it adds to a business or a client or whatever, then they're never going to use it. And that happens both internally and externally. And I think that's a great piece of advice for both, anyone starting out or anyone, in any sort of role. I think, making sure you're giving value rather than just filling a seat.
Yeah, it's not easy to do. Don't get me wrong. I talk about, show that you've proven value. It can take a long time. It really can. You've got to find the right people in your organisation that, one, support you, or probably starting off, one, who are happy to listen, two, support you, three, understand what it is you want to do. If they don't understand, you got to go through the education piece around, this is what we do, this is why we do it, this is the value that we add. It's then sitting down and going, okay, like, in terms of whatever organisation you work for and what they're trying to do, where is it that we can come and help you achieve your goals? And really, at the end of the day, that's what it's about. It's like, how does the geospatial systems help people achieve what they're trying to do within their products? The way our company works, it's almost like 3 or 4 companies in one. We're more of a central business function. So it's all around talking to people, making the right connections, listening, learning, and supporting. And, I think a lot of people in the GIS world are a little bit introverted by nature. That's just been my experience. It's definitely my case early on. It forces you to sort of get out in front of people and talk to them, learn what they're trying to do, help them solve their problems. And from that's what I'm talking about, delivering value. You get to the point where you can sit down and you can put, it's X dollars. You do get there, but early on in the process, you can be a little bit more woolly. How am I helping you do your things? Once you gather all that together, you can start to put some numbers on a page.
And I think you mentioned a really good point earlier on about you having some mentors and some managers who were both guiding and listening, and
still do now, to be honest. I didn't actively seek a mentor. I didn't put my hand up and say, I want a mentor. It just kind of happened over the years. It's just sort of 3 or 4 people. Then, in my case, they've been my managers I've had over the years, and each of them has given me, either through responsibility and trust, just giving you the opportunities to do some new work and learn from them. Sometimes it's a case of, this is how I did it, and had these issues, have a think about it. Other times it's just around, for example, go talk to John, go talk to Mary. They can help you, you know what I mean? And giving you the right connections into the right people, giving you opportunities, and just a sounding board is often often when you need it.
And yeah, and I think that's really valuable, especially in this day and age where we can be, so remote. You want to be able to, speak to people, even if that's virtually, to throw your ideas around. And I think that's where, if you adopt that sort of mindset, either purposely or accidentally, like you said, you didn't actually put your hand up, but it happened. If that happens, then that adding or demonstrating value is almost coming back to you. You're seeing people who are demonstrating how value is added, and then you can then do that yourself, and then they'll see what you're doing as well. As you grow in your role, or the business unit grows, those other people will start to take notice, and I think that also adds to that whole value add, and where you sit in the organization. So
I think
cool.
And being open to new things and learning. So, for example, I've got quite a few people in my team from different places around the world. Everyone has a unique way of looking at things. I think like a team of different people is generally stronger than a team of everyone being the same. But from the youngest in the team can teach you something, if you know what I mean. So there's no I don't have a real like hierarchical, I'm the general and you're the soldier kind of structure. You can learn things from anyone. At my company too, in the nature of us being a central business unit, you have meetings with people. They're the industry experts in the segments that they work. I'm never going to know as much as someone who covers, gold mining, for example. That's not my background. My background is the GIS side of things. So being comfortable that, you may not be the most intelligent person in the room on a particular topic, but you're the most intelligent person in terms of what you do with GIS, and that's how you can help people and drive that value.
Yeah, nice. No, I like a lot of that. Well, I like all of that. The way that you've been, that you can learn from everyone. Try to value add, seek out mentorship, or at least be open to it, and look for opportunities. I think your career has shown that, from smaller, you sort of said, people in councils often get a bad rap, but I think councils, because they have to do so much, that GIS team gets exposed to so much as well.
They're doing a lot, and it, often with limited resources. It's just the way it is. So, I think I say councils get a bad rap because there's a lot of people there doing a lot of really good work that doesn't get seen. What people see is the pothole in the street and their garbage bins gets collected. They don't see all the planning stuff that goes on. They don't see that there's people there maintaining systems that are, your 149 certificate in New South Wales, when you buy a property, tells you all of your zoning and that sort of thing. That there's people there. You can't buy your house without getting one of those. That sort of stuff. It's generally done by a team of 2, maybe 3 people, but are working pretty hard. And I learned a lot from a lot of different people at my time at Manly. And Hannah's on the call. I spent some time with him there, our times for about two years as well. So we did a lot together at Manly all those years ago.
Indeed, yes.
Well, I might. That's probably a good segue to open it up. If people have got any questions of Vaughan or of today, we're getting close to the end of our. It sort of goes so quickly, these quick chats, and if anyone's got a question, then you can either just type it in the chats. I should have had that open in case people were. Luckily not. So you can either put it in the chat or take yourself off mute and just ask. Hey, Liz,
I was going to say, can you hear me? Do I actually have it working?
Yes.
Yes. Currently in the office, and I'm looking at the wrong screen to have the video on. But just with the adding value with stuff and keeping on top of all the new technology, how do you convince is the wrong word, but how do you convince people that using the AI technology and the various assistants actually add value to the GIS moving forward instead of using tried and trusted systems, but expanding that and using it as a tool?
We've done a bit of experimentation. For us, the biggest benefit was in coding. Like coding, we do a lot of work in Python. The ability to really just cut down the time it takes to write solutions. That's been probably the biggest advantage. We're starting to use it in wider application development, and there's parts of the business that are a lot further ahead than my group. They are like real engineers, the deep in building some really cool stuff. So for us, main thing was starting with, okay, what can we do? Can we do it with less time, less people? Then around how do we integrate with the system? So that's what we're looking now is at our company, whilst we use Esri as the geospatial system for maintaining our data, we also distribute it to multiple databases and platforms, Snowflake being one, for example. So starting to look at how we can expand access to our data is probably the biggest thing.
Yeah, because what is it? I'm council, so yay! I'm
Yep.
the fun
But you
one
can
working on all the
even just
property
asking.
stuff. Yeah.
I mean, you got to be careful because whatever you put in there gets. If you haven't got a walled garden, whatever you put in there can end up. And I'm sure if you put in some private documents, you could probably find some information around them later on. But
Yeah.
I would just start with
I'm using it for coding right now.
yeah,
and,
coding and workflows, that sort of thing. You know, if I was doing this and I did it this way, is there anything I haven't thought of? We have come across a few cases where AI gets stuck and it wants to do things a particular way, and you're like, no, that doesn't work. Like, for example, you're trying to build a polygon in a strange way and it's orientated differently because it's just thinking it has to be done a particular way, in which case you just sort of have to override and go, no, we want to do it. Write your code to do it a
AI
particular way.
does gaslight you all the time.
But I just stick with the coding development stuff, start with that, and then from there you can build out. It's quite impressive what you can actually do now in terms of like wider application development. But within our business, we're lucky. We kind of have a walled estate, so we can do certain things without sharing data outside or breaking things too badly. So that's what it's being used for more is rapid application deployment, access to data. But behind the scenes, we have a lot of work we're doing now in terms of making sure the data structures are correct, metadata is there, so that the actual systems can get the information that they need to answer the questions people are asking.
Yep. Yeah, no, I'm trying to almost work out how I can, instead of using FME, get an AI assistant to help the 10.7 certificates. So similar sort of thing. And it's trying to put a case in, and FME seems to be the winner right now. And I'm just been looking at the AI stuff and I'm like, oh, there's other stuff that we can look at here. Yeah.
That's we're talking about this early on. You have to choose the best tool that you think suits the workflows, and everyone's business is different. What works in one may not work in another. That's why I never, people say to me, oh, you can't. I've been through cases where people are like, oh, you can do that with open source. What are you doing? You can.
Yeah.
You can do certain workflows, you can, but there's reasons why people use particular systems and infrastructure built around them. It's usually more that there's 50 other workflows that people haven't thought of that are built off that. But yeah, I would just have to do the old, what's best for the problem I'm trying to solve that works within the organization that I am in.
One thing as well, and like I had the pleasure of actually having Vaughn as a boss, like on my career, and like I was very privileged of that. Like I think Vaughn, like what he did, like which I think he had mentioned, it's always important to actually have got someone who actually stays positive and actually have a can-do attitude, no matter what you do. Because because if that's the case, people actually respond to you much better rather than when you just have got a negative approach. So that's something I feel. So, but yeah, like he was a great boss, I have to say. So
we did some good things, Hannah. I was talking about, you say I was your boss, but it was more like a partnership. It's really like
of course, but
it's just the two of us. So we were the two GIS guys in the council,
correct,
for about 2 years or something like that, and we did some good things.
Yeah, it is. A lot of councils are, single people or a team of, 2 or 3 tops, and so you end up having to do a lot.
Yep. We've got 20 now, but covering a lot of things. So I would say, yeah, it's and people have their specific areas. Someone might be really strong working in one sector, and that's the sector that they support. That tends to be how we're organised. Different people support different parts of the business, but it within the councils, it's often broad. I remember you did a bit of everything, really.
Yep. Nice. Thank you for that. Does anyone else have any final questions before we wrap it up for today? All right. Well, I appreciate everyone being on the webinar today. Appreciate Vaughn for all your time and information about your career. And I think there's so many positives these days, to see careers grow and change, and being able to use the technology in so many different ways. So appreciate your insight on that, Vaughn. Next week, I have it up here somewhere. Next week, we're speaking to Alistair Towers, he works at Veris at the moment, but was with Frontier SI, and so probably similar to Vaughn, been in the industry for a while. So that's Points, Lines and Polygons next week. But thank you for everyone for joining and for your questions, and have a great rest of your day, and we'll chat again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.